It's been a little more than 3 weeks since 30-year-old Jamilla Smith's mom reported her missing. Authorities say she was last heard by a 911 operator screaming and saying her ex-boyfriend was breaking into her home.
Why is it taking so long for them to provide information such as GPS coordinates, cell phone information, forensics on a burner phone that we just received knowledge of? What we don't know is why is it taking so long for them to find Millie?
If you get called 911, you hear a distress call, you don't do nothing about it, you just let it ride until you get a murder case.
Family has been trying to reach Jamilla since that day, searching her last known location, but they have had no contact with her. Jamilla's phone shows no activity since December 2nd.
Tough. It's always gonna be tough. Every song, everything that comes along that you think about your daughter comes along, it's gonna be with you day by day. So for me, I am not gonna stop until I find Millie.
The 2nd of December 2023, in the rural corners of Aiken County, South Carolina, a quiet Saturday evening was about to be shattered. To the neighbors, it was just another night. But for 30-year-old Jamilla Millie Shanae Smith, it was the night the world she had worked so hard to build was abruptly silenced. Jamilla was a mother, a student, and a woman who was actively trying to reclaim her independence. But as the clock struck 8:30 p.m., her life intersected with a series of events that investigators would spend the next 2 years trying to fully reconstruct. When the call came into the Aiken County Dispatch Center, it wasn't just a request for help. It was a terrifying, real-time log of a struggle. The dispatchers on the other end of the line heard the engines, the frantic movement, and the desperate pleas for safety. They heard the moment the situation crossed the line from a domestic dispute into something far more permanent.
In Jamilla's last phone call to 911, she said her ex-boyfriend broke into her house and was chasing her down the road. On the call, Jamilla sounds like she is out of breath. A car engine is heard revving. Jamilla is screaming. The phone appears to drop, and a male is heard telling Jamilla he will take her to the emergency room. Jamilla continues to scream, "Don't hurt me," and "You hit me." The phone call ended, but she never made it to the hospital.
We know the timeline of the call. We know where the vehicle was tracked. We know how the legal system eventually responded. But as we dig into the evidence, we are left with the silence that followed. The line didn't just go silent. It cut off at the exact moment she accused him of the unthinkable. But what happened in those final seconds that the tape didn't capture? And how did a 911 call from a quiet road in Jackson, South Carolina, turn into a months-long forensic manhunt? Welcome back to The Dark Minds. If you want the truth behind the headlines, hit subscribe. Let's get into the timeline. To understand the tragedy of December 2nd, we have to look past the headlines and the police reports. We have to look at the woman who was at the center of a life that mattered, a life that was defined not by her final moments, but by the goals she set, the love she poured into her children, and the resilience she carried every single day. At 30 years old, Jamilla, or Millie, as everyone knew her, was in a chapter of her life that was meant to be a turning point. She wasn't just surviving, she was building. As a mother to 2 young children, her universe revolved around them. Neighbors and friends remember a woman who was constantly on the move, juggling the demands of motherhood with a dedication to her own growth. Whether she was focused on her education or navigating the daily grind, Millie possessed a quiet, steady ambition. She was a constant presence in her community, a familiar face who brought a sense of energy into the rooms she entered. But beneath the surface of that daily routine, there was a struggle that few truly understood in its entirety. It is a reality that exists behind closed doors in far too many households across the country, the exhausting, isolating labor of navigating a relationship that had turned controlling. For Millie, the home environment had become a minefield. See, domestic abuse doesn't always start with a loud confrontation. It often starts with a slow, calculated erosion of a person's boundaries. It's the subtle redirection of a person's time, the quiet questioning of their friendships, the gradual tightening of a perimeter around their autonomy. For months, Millie was living in that space. She was dealing with a pattern of behavior that was designed to make her feel small, to make her feel like her choices were no longer her own. And for a woman as capable and driven as Millie, that dissonance between who she was and who she was being forced to become was incredibly painful. What makes this story so heavy isn't just the finality of the tragedy. It's the fact that Millie didn't go into this alone. She was proactive. She was vocal. In the weeks leading up to December 2nd, she didn't just sit in silence. She spoke out. She reached out to those she trusted, and she navigated the difficult, often labyrinthine process of seeking help. She documented her concerns. She tried to establish boundaries. She reached out to friends, to family, and in some instances, to the systems meant to protect individuals in her position. She was doing everything right. She was trying to secure a future where she and her children could exist without the looming shadow of constant surveillance and conflict. She was attempting to break the cycle, to force a reset, to find a path to safety that seemed, by all accounts, attainable if only the right resources had been applied. But as we retrace those days in late 2023, the tragedy takes on a different shape. It becomes a story not of a woman who didn't fight, but of a woman who fought with everything she had, only to find the doors she knocked on were not fully opening. The red flags were there. They were visible to her friends, they were visible to her family, and in the documented interactions that took place, they were visible to anyone who took the time to look. There was a growing frequency in the behavior, the unexpected appearances, the demands on her time, the relentless pressure. It was an escalation that was being broadcast in real time. And yet, there is a profound, lingering frustration when you look back at the chronology of these events. You see the efforts she made. You see the clear warnings she gave to the world around her, and you are left to wonder about the mechanics of the response. We see the patterns. We see the clear, bright lines that should have triggered a different outcome. But looking back at the timeline, we find the red flags everyone saw, but the one question that haunts her family is, why was help never there when she needed it most? The date was the 2nd of December 2023. In the rural outskirts of Jackson, South Carolina, the onset of winter brought an early darkness to the area. Throughout the afternoon, the hours ticked by with the deceptive normalcy of a typical Saturday. But as the clock pushed past 8 p.m., the atmosphere in the region began to shift. The events that followed were not a slow, calculated build. They were a rapid-fire escalation that would soon consume the attention of every law enforcement agency in Aiken County. At approximately 8:30 p.m., the Aiken County Emergency Dispatch Center received the call, a communication that would eventually become the centerpiece of the entire criminal investigation. This wasn't a static report of a past event. It was an unfolding crisis. To the dispatcher, the situation was immediately clear. They were listening to a chase. They were listening to an intrusion. The logs from the dispatch center detail a harrowing sequence. The phone line was a direct link to the chaos of the road. On the recording, the background noise was overwhelming, a cacophony of an engine revving, the sharp squeal of tires against asphalt, and the frantic, unmistakable sounds of a physical struggle. Millie was on the phone, and she was doing everything she could to communicate her location and the nature of the threat. She explicitly stated that she was being pursued, that her home had been compromised, and that she was being run off the road. The dispatchers, highly trained to remain calm under pressure, were feeding information to responding units in real time. But as the call progressed, the cadence changed. The dispatchers heard the roar of an engine accelerating. They heard the frantic movement as the suspect vehicle engaged. And through it all, they heard Millie, her voice strained, pleading, and desperate, as she realized the severity of the confrontation she was locked in. It was a technical log of a life and death struggle, recorded in the digital archives of the county's emergency system. The procedural timeline here is critical. Patrol units were immediately alerted. Deputies were scrambled to the location, their sirens cutting through the quiet night air of Jackson. They were navigating the same rural roads that had just served as the stage for the incident. But in rural Aiken County, geography is a formidable opponent. The distance between the dispatch call, the arrival of the first deputy, and the movement of the vehicles involved was measured in heartbeats. Every second that the dispatchers stayed on the line, they were essentially trying to hold a door open, hoping for a location update that could guide the responding officers to an interception point. They were listening to the sounds of a vehicle, a machine being used to force a stop. The dispatch record holds the grim documentation of those final moments before the line went dead.
On the call, Jamilla sounds like she is out of breath. A car engine is heard revving. Jamilla is screaming. The phone appears to drop, and a male is heard telling Jamilla he will take her to the emergency room. Jamilla continues to scream, "Don't hurt me," and "You hit me." The phone call ended, but she never made it to the hospital.
By the time deputies arrived at the location of the 911 call, the road was empty. The suspect was gone, Millie was gone, and for the next 72 hours, the trail went completely cold. For 72 agonizing hours, the case of Jamilla Smith occupied a terrifying purgatory. The initial emergency call had faded into the silence of the Aiken County night, leaving investigators with nothing but a set of GPS coordinates and a missing woman. But as the clock ticked past the 3-day mark, the nature of the operation underwent a fundamental shift. What began as a desperate search and rescue mission evolved into a high-priority criminal manhunt. Law enforcement agencies across the region pooled their resources, treating every lead, every witness statement, and every potential movement as a critical piece of a rapidly developing forensic puzzle. The primary focus of this intensive dragnet was a specific individual, Daniel Gabriel Harmon. Investigators had been tracking a lead involving a rental vehicle, a Dodge Charger. In the context of a modern criminal investigation, a vehicle is rarely just a machine, it is a mobile crime scene, a repository of physical data, GPS logs, and biological footprints. The authorities had identified this specific car as the nexus of their investigation. By the morning of December 5th, the manhunt had reached a fever pitch. Intelligence indicated that Harmon was in the vicinity of North Augusta, and a strategic plan was put into motion to apprehend him. The apprehension that followed was not a pursuit, but a calculated standoff. North Augusta became the site of a high-stakes tactical operation. Law enforcement officers, aware of the volatility of the suspect and the gravity of the potential crimes, approached with extreme caution. There was no room for error. The objective was clear: secure the suspect, recover the vehicle, and prevent the destruction of any further evidence. By the end of the day, Daniel Gabriel Harmon was in custody. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the investigation was only entering its most complex phase. With the Dodge Charger finally secured by the forensic unit, the search moved from the streets to the lab. This was the moment of truth for the investigation. Technicians meticulously processed the interior, looking for anything that could link the car to the events of December 2nd. As they moved from the cabin to the cargo area, the focus intensified. It wasn't long before they hit a critical breakthrough. Inside the trunk, forensic teams discovered blood evidence. It was a damning, undeniable physical link. The presence of that biological material transformed the circumstantial narrative into hard scientific fact. It established a direct connection between the vehicle, the suspect in custody, and the incident on the road in Jackson. The timeline was beginning to solidify. The pieces were locking into place, painting a gruesome picture of what had occurred on that quiet Saturday night. They had the suspect, They had the blood. They had the car. But when they opened the trunk, it was empty. The biggest piece of the puzzle was still out there, and the clock was ticking.
Deputies found Daniel Harmon on December 5th at a house in North Augusta, leading to a search warrant. On that same property, in the front yard, they also found the missing Dodge Charger with blood in the trunk. They sent that off to be tested, and you can see the results of that test are redacted. But they received the results December 23rd and upgraded Harmon's charges to murder the same day. The arrest warrant also says, based on the information, investigators believe Harmon hit Jamilla with a vehicle and did not take her to the hospital.
In the immediate wake of Daniel Harmon's arrest, the investigation into the disappearance of Jamilla Smith reached a critical plateau. The primary suspect was behind bars, and the vehicle had been processed. Yet, the most vital, agonizing question remained unanswered. Where was Millie? The search had evolved from a manhunt into a grueling, landscape-level recovery operation. But as investigators began to peel back the layers of Harmon's movements, they uncovered something far more sinister, a web of complicity that extended beyond a single individual. This wasn't a crime that existed in a vacuum. It was a calculated effort, and it required assistance. By the spring of 2024, the investigation had turned its sights toward two men, Brian Alexander Hampton Jr. and Clyde James Hendley II. These weren't witnesses who had stumbled upon a scene. These were individuals who, according to authorities, had made the conscious decision to involve themselves in the aftermath of a tragedy.
In addition to Daniel Harmon's arrest on kidnapping and murder charges, authorities have charged two other men in connection to Jamilla's death, 46-year-old Clyde Hendley II and 35-year-old Brian Hampton Jr. Both were charged with accessory after the fact of murder, accused of helping Harmon hide her body.
Their roles were deliberate and cold. They were the facilitators of a cover-up. As detectives drilled down into the timeline of that first week in December, they discovered a coordinated attempt to obscure the truth. Every piece of physical evidence that had been discarded, every movement that had been masked, and every effort to hide Jamilla's location was tied to this network of silence. The investigation into Hampton and Hendley was a slow, grinding process of interrogation and forensic deduction. For months, these men held the secret to where Millie had been taken. They had allegedly stepped in to assist in the disposal of evidence and the concealment of her remains, effectively choosing to protect their own interests over the humanity of a woman who had been taken from her children. The legal system designated them as accessories after the fact to murder, a charge that speaks to the gravity of their involvement. They were the architects of the silence that frustrated search teams, local law enforcement, and, most cruelly, the family who simply wanted to bring her home. Every day that passed was a day of calculated evasion. The woods of Aiken County are vast, dense, and unforgiving, a reality that the perpetrators were counting on. They knew that without cooperation, the chance of finding Jamilla was slim. They relied on the difficulty of the terrain and the limitations of search technology to keep their actions hidden in the shadows. But they had underestimated the sheer resolve of the investigators who refused to let the case go cold. Month after month, the forensic teams searched, cross-referencing satellite data, phone records, and witness statements, slowly closing the net on the location where they had been led to believe the answers lay. It took months of forensic work to break the silence of the accomplices. But why did it take until the 10th of May, 2024, to find where they had hidden her on Silver Bluff Road? What were they protecting?
To begin first with breaking news, the remains of a missing woman out of Aiken County were found 5 months after she went missing. The sheriff's office says she was found in a wooded area on Silver Bluff Road. The investigation started at the beginning of December when Jamilla Smith was first reported missing. Deputies say 3 people, Daniel Harmon, Brian Hampton Jr., and Clyde Hendley II, have all been arrested. They're facing several charges. Harmon is charged with kidnapping and murder.
We have taken statements, evidence processing. There's still a significant amount of evidence that needs to be processed, electronic data, and so forth.
We have walked through the timeline, the forensic evidence, and the legal outcome. But when the gavel finally came down and the courtroom doors closed, the story didn't simply end. For the family of Jamilla Smith, the silence that followed that 8:30 p.m. phone call has been replaced by the weight of a lifetime of missing moments.
Tonight, a little more than 2 years after Jamilla Smith disappeared, her ex-boyfriend pleading guilty and sentenced in her kidnapping and murder. It started December 2nd of 2023. Jamilla calls 911 from her home in Aiken, saying that her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Harmon, had broken into her house and was chasing her down the street. Then the call ends and Jamilla was never seen from or heard from again.
And I deeply apologize to all 7 family members or families that have been hurt through this. And if y'all can, I just ask that y'all forgive me. In Jesus' name, amen.
When we look at this case through the lens of history, we are forced to confront an uncomfortable, broader truth. This wasn't just the failure of a single individual. It was a breakdown in the safety nets designed to catch those who are calling for help. The red flags were visible to those around her. The cries for assistance were documented. And yet, the escalation continued, unchecked, right up until the point of the tragedy. It forces us to ask a difficult question. How many more warning signs need to be ignored before we fundamentally change the way we respond to the crisis of domestic violence? We have to stop viewing these situations as private matters to be handled behind closed doors and start recognizing them as urgent, community-wide responsibilities. Millie's life mattered. She was a mother, she was a person with a future, and she deserved the protection that the system failed to provide. Her story isn't just a case file, it is a reminder that when the system falters, the cost is measured in human life. We cover these cases here on The Dark Minds because we believe that by carefully analyzing the past, we can bring clarity to the present and demand better for the future. We honor those who were taken by ensuring their stories are not forgotten and by pushing for a deeper understanding of the investigative failures that occurred. Justice has been served in the courtroom, but the story of Jamilla Smith remains a testament to the lives we lose when the warning signs are ignored. If you want to keep the focus on cases that demand justice, subscribe to The Dark Minds. Did you think the sentencing was sufficient, or did the system let her down again? Let me know your thoughts below. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.